This video is about Canon APS-C cameras. There are a lot of abbreviations and terminology in the world of digital photography that can make everything really confusing. This video will help give you the concept of what an APS-C camera sensor is. We'll look at the plus and minuses of that size sensor, and we'll also give you a list of all the current APS-C cameras that are on the market from Canon right now. APS stands for Advanced Photo System, and the -C refers to the classic. It really refers to the size of the sensor. It's a smaller sensor if you compare it with the size of the original full frame, which is the same size as the old 35mm negatives were. As you can see in this illustration, the APS-C format is quite a bit smaller than full frame. But as you'll see in a minute, that's not necessarily a bad thing. APS-C cameras are often called crop cameras because they give you a cropped view of your subject compared to what you'd get if you had a full frame camera. The biggest thing to know is that the angle of view you get with a certain lens will be narrower with an APS-C camera versus a full frame camera. Here's an example. Now, a narrower angle isn't necessarily a bad thing, it's just different. The way you compensate for that is you use a wider angle lens on an APS-C camera to get the same angle that you would with a full frame. As an example, you'd use an 18mm lens on an APS-C camera, and that would give you the same angle as if you used a 28mm lens on a full frame sensor camera. As a second example, this is a Canon EF 85mm prime lens, a mild telephoto lens. So we put it on a full frame camera, and it gives you a certain amount of magnification of the subject, a mild telephoto lens. However, if we put the same lens on a Canon APS-C camera, like the 70D, the angle of view is narrower, and it gives you the same view as a 136mm lens. Now, to get a little better understanding of how EF versus EFS lenses fit on APS-C cameras, there's another video you could watch, and the link to that video is in the description box below this video. Now, what are the disadvantages of having a camera with an APS-C size sensor? Number one is the size of the image file. In other words, if you have a larger sensor, you have the opportunity to collect a lot more information, a lot more pixels. Depending on how many pixels are jammed into the APS-C sensor, image quality generally is better with a full frame than an APS-C. But the newer APS-C sensors are so good, and the technology and the processing on that image data is so good that you can really get great photos with APS-C cameras. Now, another disadvantage is Canon and the other manufacturers generally offer a lot more lens choices for their full frame cameras than they do for their APS-C cameras. And a third potential disadvantage of a smaller APS-C camera sensor size is digital noise. When the manufacturers jam all these pixels onto a smaller sensor, they make the pixels really small, and they're not as efficient as gathering light as the larger pixels are on some of the bigger full frame sensor cameras. Having smaller pixels collecting the light could lead to digital noise, especially at high ISO settings. Nobody likes noisy photos. What are the advantages of using a Canon APS-C camera? Two advantages. First of all, the cameras and the lenses are smaller. That means they're smaller and lighter and easier to carry. The second advantage is money. And if you're like me, you like to save money. With the smaller cameras and the smaller sensors, they're cheaper to make and then cheaper to buy. So you don't have to spend as much money on the cameras and lenses, you can buy other accessories. Here's a table showing you all the current Canon APS-C cameras on the market right now. You'll notice I left off the T2i and the XT. They're just so old, they're kind of irrelevant now. But it includes all the Rebels, the T3, 4, 5, 6, 7, all the way up through 8, which is just released. Also the world's smallest DSLRs, the SL1, SL2, SL3. And then the series, the 70D Mark I, Mark II, the 7070D, and the 50D, 60D, 70D, 80D, and 90D. Subscribe to the channel right now, that way you won't miss any of my other videos on Canon camera equipment. And hit the little notification bell. That'll give you a notification when the next Canon video is published. So thanks for watching. I hope you found this video on the Canon APS-C sensor cameras useful, please let me know in the comment box below which camera you're specifically thinking about getting. And have a blast. Shoot a Canon.